Hello, it's time for, at long last, another I Ching video. I know that I haven't been doing these as often as I would have hoped to have done them. I'm sorry for that, but I'm going to keep working at them. And the current one we're working on is number 17, following. There we go. Following, which, of course, as always, using the Magician's I Ching, my very well-worn copy of it. Hexagram 17 is a very interesting hexagram because it's one that has a lot of interplay between the significances of the different lines. What you have is the trigram for water is above and for fire is below. And we've seen this already with heaven and the world in the earlier hexagrams that we already took a look at. When you saw harmony, hexagram 11, you had the world, which was feminine above, and heaven, which is masculine below, and that indicated a harmonious thing because it created this interbalance between masculine and feminine, where usually, the masculine position is on top and the feminine on bottom. But if you reverse those, then what you have is an awakening of potential for both, for movement and for interdirecting with each other. Here you can see, if you use the Western symbols for fire and water, they're literally pointing at each other and moving in the opposite directions from each other. So there's powerful interaction. Now, following obviously deals with the theme of following, but it's a very interesting hexagram because it's not, when people hear that, they think, well, it advises following. And in a way it does, because it says you've got to follow something. But the whole issue of this hexagram is, what are you going to choose to follow? So the image of the hexagram is water over fire, thunder rumbling in a lake. And the description is not very helpful, let's be honest. Okay, the description of hexagram 17 says, following, great success. Remember, almost a large number of hexagrams say great success. Right pushing brings gain, which also is said very often. No mistake or harm. Okay, so if you get no changing lines, that's what you've got to work with. And so it's saying, basically, follow something, pick the right moment, and follow. And whatever happens, if you've got no change line, saying, well, whatever happens, if things might go right or might go wrong, but it won't really be up to you anyway. Okay, so you've got to follow the movement that is there. And so a lot of times, if you get a number 17 hexagram and you're not, you get no changing lines, then it's probably that you're not able to really make a choice. The choice is between, do I follow or do I not do anything? And in this case, it seems that following is usually the better idea, unless not doing anything is the better idea. Because here you have the great work, the advice as it is to the superior individual, saying, noting the times, seeing darkness fall, the superior individual goes inside his home and rests, knowing there is no more to be done. And seeing darkness fall, you could say it's a reference to a state of chaos. Because what you have is water is over fire. That's wrong. Fire is supposed to be above water. And what you have is the forces of the light are moving into the west, right? The fire is in the west, so it's suggesting the end of the time of light, right? And so when you've got a chaotic situation, there are times when probably the best thing you can do is retire. And so how do you know if that's the time or if you should follow something else? Well, the message in the lines is hexagram 17 is fundamentally, you could say, a conservative hexagram. It's a hexagram that advises trying to work harmoniously with the status quo and to work with it so that you're even if you find yourself in a position of strength, it says don't rock the boat right now, right? So try to maintain the status quo and make growth happen by being in accord with the weaker forces that have power right now. So you've got the water hexagram that is in the ruling position, fire hexagram in the bottom. The strongest line here is line 1, right, which has the force of heaven, but it's at the very bottom of the hexagram. And so it could theoretically cause all kinds of havoc or not. And the advice of hexagram 17 and the reason why the description for the superior individual is saying, you know, if you're thinking of causing trouble, then you're better off just forgetting about it and going home and resting. There's nothing you can do, because even though this figure at the bottom is very powerful, it's also in a very weak position. It's very low on the totem pole of the hierarchy, right? So it's not going to be able to overthrow the powers that be, and all it's going to do is cause a bunch of destruction in its wake. So the way that you can make things be better, not necessarily what you want, because you have to follow to make things better in this case. You don't get to lead. You don't get to overthrow. You have to follow. So the way that you can make things better is by working conjointly and uniting the disparate forces that are found throughout this, this hexagram. So the text, the commentary, the Confucian commentary says the firm, that is to say the fire line below here, the line 1, follows the soft, which is line 5, which is in the middle position there and is the king, right? So what you have is a king that is not actually, that has a lot of power, but is actually a very weak individual. You have the peasant here, or the barbarian, or what have you, who's very powerful personally, but very weak institutionally. And if those two forces butt against each other, there's going to be a lot of chaos. And if they work together, then you can have harmony. So if the strong follows the soft, in this case, if the firm lets itself be dominated by the soft, then movement and joy will be conjoined. All in the universe will be in accord with what time dictates for it, because the time dictates right now that it's a moment where weak forces or weak people or weak institutions are in power, and you have to just try to move in accord with it at this moment. It says acting at the appropriate time is vital, which means that you have to realize that the way that you act in a given moment is very important. Line 1, the bottom line, says ideas change over time. The powerful must also change. Rightly pushing your will brings good luck. Leave home and mingle with outsiders, and results follow. So the imagery of line 1 is that of a well, it could be several things. It could be the image of say a peasant leader becoming a charismatic figure with great popular support. It could be the image of a dignitary being sent out to the boundaries of the empire and having to carve out his own position there, right? But probably the actual reference here is that of a local king, a local chief, like Chief Wen, having significant power in his own tribe, but that now must go and interact with the other tribes around him and with the great central power, right? And figure out that, you know, even though he's personally very powerful, he's going to have to deal with a lot of people that he might not even have a lot of respect for. And if he's acting righteously and interacting well with those outsiders, then good results will follow. That's if he does that. But if things don't go that way, if he tries to push his own agenda above all else, you're going to see some trouble. So line 2, you have here, following the inferior person, he loses the superior individual. Following fashion, he loses what works. You can't follow 2 ways at once. And so line 2, the middle line here, is obviously connected to the middle line of the upper trigram, the king line. And yet it's also about moving away from the basis of that solid line in the bottom and moving up towards some kind of a, you know, a more modern perspective, let's say a more weak perspective that is found in line 3. So you're following what's fashionable instead of what had been working. You're abandoning the status quo. So if the figure in line 1 moves away from acting as a force to help maintain the status quo, potentially still while trying to enact change, then instead they move to something new to try to create some kind of revolution, let's say, you're going to find that it's going to be a problem. It says you cannot follow 2 ways at once. You can't be a revolutionary and a part of the establishment at the same time, right? If you try to do that, one of the 2 has got to give, and there will be lots of problems. Line 3 says, following the superior individual, he loses the inferior person. Following the old, he loses the fashionable, but gains what is sought. Make no move, be steadfast and determined in your will. So in line 3, you're seeing a parallel here with line 6 that suggests that if you're following the righteous path, it's going to be harder for you, right? If you're going along with the status quo, you know that there's going to be prices that will be paid for that. But it will also mean that you'll actually be able to make more progress. If you just try to overthrow everything, you're going to have a much bigger problem on your hands. You're going to end up having damage. And another way of looking at this is also that if you're trying to stand for something, right, what is righteous, then you have to stick to that no matter the cost. But you can't so you can't just give in to the impulse of abandoning your principles for the sake of what your ambitions are, right? So it says, make no move, be steadfast in your will. In the long term, it ends up being what has to happen. Line 4 says, following a deceiver brings disaster. But if you are true, no harm comes. Being open and honest, others will follow you and all will benefit. So it's possible that you were misled, that you were led by people who are promising falsely to you, right? But if you are true within yourself, this is a significant line in line 4 because it's the beginning of the upper trigram, right? So if you are solid in parallel with line 1 here, but in a much higher position, you are able to now make a representation of your truth that will eventually have an effect. So it says, being open and honest, others will follow you and all benefit. Line 5, the king line, says, treating all good people with sincerity, certainty in following, good luck. So you have the in the position, if you reach this high of a position, then the work that you've done will allow you to make necessary necessary good works that will help to mitigate any of the problems that were existing within the institution, right? So it's saying that if you can work your way to a place within the institution with sincerity, then you can make change that'll happen. But it doesn't always go smoothly. So in line 6, you see, captured, he is forced to follow. He is put in irons. The king must go do penance and sacrifice on mountains. So you can end up making reforms, but you also can end up having to pay a price if you had been taking the other route of trying to cause reforms too quickly, right? And then you can end up in a position where you are you're forced to make amends. You know, to go and sacrifice on the mountaintops was the traditional sacrifices that were made in the time of the Shang Empire. So it's suggesting there that you have to prove your loyalty to the system at the end of this hexagram, because otherwise you can become seen as a threat. And of course, you see the continuation of this in the next hexagram, where it talks about repair, right? And this part, a big part of this tells a story about Chief Wen and his son and the Shang Emperor and stuff like that, that ends up expressing the meanings within, the values within this hexagram and its pair hexagram in number 18. And to learn about those sort of things, you would need to check out the Fa Society. So if you're looking for a deeper understanding of the I Ching and its cosmology and its value both as divination and as a system of self-development, and to learn a curriculum of study that is part of a coherent program for self-transformation, for discovering that superior individual, be sure to check out the rest of it. If this is the first video you've seen, check out the rest of the Yi Fa Society playlist and look at the sections on each of the hexagrams. If you become a member of the Yi Fa Society, if you're interested in that kind of serious study, then you can get in touch about sending me about an application for the Yi Fa Society. And if you're in the Yi Fa Society, every time I do one of these videos, I do another video that is explicitly for members of the Yi Fa Society that only they get to see, and where I go into much more detail about things like line structure, about the history of the hexagram and its cosmological and moral significance. So keep that in mind if what you're looking for is more of that deeper examination, right? I think what you get in this video is a lot of what you need to kind of understand the context of the hexagram for basic divination, and that's great. And if that's all you're looking for, then that's fine too, right? But be sure to check out all the other playlists in this channel. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. And if you're interested, you'll find a link in the description below to the newsletter. The newsletter isn't really coming out very much anymore, but when you subscribe to the newsletter, what you'll get is an invitation, a welcome email of some kind that you get when you subscribe. And there's a link in that email to a free PDF of The Path and the Power. So be sure to check that out. The Path of the Power is my translation and commentary of the Tao Te Ching, which is a great companion if you've already got the Magician's I Ching. And it's completely free on PDF, and you can just download it by adding yourself to the mailing list. I guess that's everything for today. Take care.